What is going on, Goombas? My name is Michael James. I am a published author and self-employed writing coach, and today we are finally getting back into the writing journal series and talking about the notes I've taken on writing and story structure and some of the books I've read, and it's exciting stuff. I hope that you find it intriguing. This is going to be kind of like a podcast style. It's just going to be me talking about what I've learned, reading some of my notes to you. So listen to this while you're driving to work, or listen to this while you're doing the dishes or making dinner or whatever. I don't know, whatever you want. Man, this is heavy. I gotta put this down. But listen, I want these videos to be exciting to you and for you to learn a lot, but without having to read the entire book yourself, because some of these books are very lengthy, and I know a lot of people don't have the time to read all these books. So hopefully these notes will be kind of like a snippet of those books that you can learn from. So in my first writing journal series, I did 6 episodes on this book, The Writer's Journey by Christopher Vogler. This book is incredible. Highly recommend it. You can check out those videos if you want. They're a little cringy.
Very awkward and cringy.
But check them out. There is still a lot of beneficial information in there for you to learn from. And I am now going to be giving you notes on Save the Cat by Blake Snyder, another very famous book on storytelling. This one talks about it more from a screenwriter's perspective, but there's still so much to learn, whether you're novel writing or writing nonfiction, whatever it may be, there's still tons to learn. So hopefully these notes are beneficial to you. And before we jump into the notes, I do want to say that I am a published author and I have 2 books out right now. You can check them out on Amazon, but I have a 3rd book coming out this year. I'm super excited about it. It's some of the best work I've ever done. It is called You've Got the Wrong Guy, and it's basically about this Uber driver named CJ who, his past collides with the present, and he finds a sticky note on the windshield of his car that says, "Return what you've stolen or else."
I didn't steal, I borrowed.
And he starts freaking out because he doesn't know if this is tied to his past. He doesn't know if this has something to do with something he recently did, and he thinks they've got the wrong guy.
You've got the wrong guy.
And it's, he's chasing shadows throughout a lot of the book. It's a lot of cat and mouse, but there's also a heavy undertone of morality and human nature and talking about fear and some of the things he's dealing with. So I'm really proud of that book. I'm super excited for it to be released. It should be released sometime this spring coming up. So if you're watching this video in the future and it's past May of 2024, it's likely the book is already released. So check it out. You can find it on Amazon, or I may be selling signed copies soon enough. So you can always reach out if you want to buy a signed copy from me. Reach out, let me know. But yeah, so let's jump into the journal. Let's talk about these notes. And before we get started, grab yourself a coffee and let's get right into it. All right, so I lowered myself a little bit in my chair because I want to be close to the mic so my voice is nice and crisp for you. But we're going to get right into these notes, and we are talking about, like I said, Save the Cat. This is from the beginning of the book. We're starting with the introduction pages. Introduction point 15, where I have a quote that says, "Liking the person we go on a journey with is the single most important element in drawing us into the story." That is so good. It is so important because, when you write a story, you are going to immerse your audience into the world that you're creating, and they are going to be following the footsteps of your main character, and they're going to literally be in their shoes. So if they don't like that person, then they're not going to like your story.
I have to like it. Who said you have to like it?
The Save the Cat scene, where we meet the hero, and the hero does something, like saving a cat, that defines who he is and makes us, the audience, like him. This is really important to have in your story. It doesn't have to be in every story, but there are a lot of stories we see this in. I mean, if you look at the movie Shrek, you see Shrek save Donkey from the guards, which is kind of in a comical way because he's like, "You and what army?" and that scares the guards away.
Oh, really? You and what army?
Another example of this is in The Incredibles, where he literally saves a cat from a tree for a lady right before taking out the bad guy. Lots of movies have a Save the Cat scene. You don't need one, but it's a really great way to help us really connect and relate to your main character, seeing them do something morally good, morally righteous, and we just want to be on their side right from that moment. So page 2, what is it? The biggest factor to pitching and convincing someone of a story If it's not clear, it won't sell. There has to be a what is it point. What is the plot of this story? Pre-sold franchise, something the audience is already sold on, cutting down on the what is it factor. Hollywood decision makers know odds are the sequels will sell well, even if they're bad, because people would rather spend $10 on something familiar than something new. And this is something important to consider, because if you're selling a story, whether it's book or screenplay, you are fighting against what already sells. So, whether that's the Marvel series, the Disney World, Pixar, Transformers, whatever's out there, Fast and Furious even, all these franchises have so many movies out, and they keep making them, even though they should end some of these series. They keep making them because they know they sell. They know people are going to buy these tickets to see these movies in the theaters because those movies have proven to do well in the past. They're going to keep doing well, even if they're not that great. With Fast and Furious, it seems like a lot of them keep going downhill, but it doesn't matter because, Vin Diesel or whoever is still in all the movies. And there's still fast racing cars and there's still explosions. So people are still going to watch them. And that's the same with Transformers is a great example of a franchise that just kept going downhill and kept doing worse and worse, but people keep buying them because they liked the first one enough that they want to see what happens in the other ones, even though the other ones didn't perform as well at all. One thing I do want to add to that is if you are a writer and you're trying to get started with becoming a little more well-known as an author, a great thing to do is sell series. That's why a lot of publishers want you to sell your books in series and not standalones, because they know if you hit one good book and that book does well, then they know that book 2 and book 3 will probably do well as well, because, face it, if the first one sold well and people like that story, they like the main character you created, they like the world you made, they're going to want to keep reading in that world. They're going to want to see what the next obstacle he faces or what the next adventure he goes on is. So if you're trying to get into the author world, something you can consider is creating a series of your own, creating a franchise of your own. For me personally, I like writing standalone stories, but I have considered this heavily because I want to become more well-known as an author. Page 4. Forget about all the cool scene ideas in your head and focus on one thing, answering what is it in one sentence. This is called your logline. So an example of some loglines is a newly married couple must spend Christmas Day at each of their 4 divorced parents' homes. This is for Christmas. A just hired employee goes on a company weekend and soon discovers someone's trying to kill him. This is the retreat. A risk-averse teacher plans on marrying his dream girl, but must first accompany his overprotective future brother-in-law, a cop, on a ride-along from hell. Ride-along. I want to point something out here. In a lot of loglines, there is a but moment or something else happens. So for example, a just hired employee goes on a company weekend. Ordinary. And soon discovers what? Someone's trying to kill him. So it adds to that ordinary and makes it extraordinary, right? Or a risk-averse teacher plans on marrying his dream girl. Whatever. But must first accompany his overprotective future brother-in-law on a cop on a ride-along from hell. Just to kind of help you if you're trying to create a logline or trying to figure out what is it for your story is, then you can try to consider what is ordinary about this story? What is the ordinary person? What is the ordinary setting? And how do I make it extraordinary in my story? The logline must contain some sort of irony. Irony hooks the reader. A good logline must be emotionally intriguing, like an itch you have to scratch. A logline must contain a whole movie. A good logline blossoms in your brain. This is a really good point, because if you read a good logline, a lot of times you can already picture some of the things that are going to happen in this story. If you're scrolling through Netflix, right, and you are clicking on the movies, reading their summaries, that's basically their log lines. And a good log line will hook them from the first sentence or two. They'll read it and they'll be like, ooh, I want to read this. Or I want to watch this, or whatever it is. So try to think of in your story, especially if you're writing a book and you're trying to think of how do you want to pitch it on your Amazon description or on the back of the book. Think of having a one-liner or 2 sentences that really just sum up the entire plot in one line, and it hooks us. It makes us we can already picture some of the scenes happening in our head. So not only does the logline reel you in, but it must promise more. Logline must contain who's it for. The genre, the setting, and the audience should all be relatively understood from the logline. And this is true for most stories as well. Like if you read a log line, you should already know, oh, this is a fantastical world, or oh, this is like a real life scenario. You already know what kind of stakes are happening in this story because of the log line. So if there's a killer on the loose and you know this is probably like a thriller or a mystery of some sort, you have an idea of what this story is all about. In the case of a movie, the cast is also fairly understood. You'll know what kind of characters are going to be in that movie. A logline must contain a good title. The intrigue of the logline must carry over. Titles have to say what it is without killing the logline's intrigue. So you can't have a title that makes the logline redundant, in other words. So don't be generic. Road test your logline pitch. Go to people at the store, on the sidewalk, on the subway, and give them the pitch. If they drift, there's likely problems with the logline. I love this because as a writer myself, I struggle to talk about my writing to strangers, and I think it's really important that I am willing to talk to strangers, because not only does that make a name for myself where I live, but it ensures that my story ideas are good. Like if I were buying a coffee somewhere and I was trying to consider a new story idea I had, I shouldn't be afraid to say, hey, can I run a story idea across to you? It'll take 30 seconds. I just want to talk about a book I'm writing. And they'll be like, sure. Like, who's going to say no to that? Like, nobody's going to say, no thanks. Like, I mean, maybe someone would, but like, you know what I mean? Like, we are so afraid to talk about our storytelling, and there's no reason to fear it. And it's only going to benefit us if we do, because if they're actually like, oh, wow, that sounds interesting. Like, I would read that. I would watch that. Like, then you have a good story idea if like 10 different people say that. There's a lot more strangers than friends buying tickets to movies. No matter who is encouraging you on the friend side of your life, it's the strangers you really need to impress. Page 21. Screenwriter's daily conundrum is how to avoid a cliche. And I do want to add this really quick. A cliche is different than a trope. He doesn't differentiate in his book here, but I want to explain it because this is how I understand it or interpret this information. A trope is something that you can use in a story that's like an arc or a character or a setting or a plot that people already know. It has been used in storytelling hundreds and hundreds of times. So rags to riches is a plot trope. We understand that a main character starting from the bottom goes to the top. A Pursuit of Happiness is a great example of a movie that uses rags to riches.
There's no why in happiness, it's an I.
Another trope can be the underdog story. Somebody starts out, maybe it's a kid being bullied in school, and by the end of the story, he's the popular kid.
I'm tired of being bullied.
A trope for a scene would be the watering well. In other words, a lot of stories have the main character meet bad guys or allies at somewhere where people buy drinks or buy food or the marketplace or a bar or whatever it may be. So like lots of movies like Legend or Jack Reacher.
Side.
Pay your check first.
I'll pay later.
You won't be able to.
Or Star Wars
Solo. I'm Captain of the Millennium Falcon.
They all meet the good or bad guys at bar scenes. It happens a lot. So those are just some trope examples. A cliche is when you take a trope, but you make it too similar to another story. Whether you quote a similar line, they say the same exact things, or things happen the same exact way. Whatever it is, if you read a scene from a movie or book, if you watch a scene or read a scene, and you're like, hey, this reminds me exactly of this movie, that's a bad thing. That, like, you should not be able to see your story in someone else's story. That makes it cliche. But a trope is just using the same concept, but putting your own unique twist or telling it in your own unique way that makes it fit your story and not the same as other stories. Hope that makes sense. You can get really close to a cliche, but at the last second, turn away and give it a twist. Give me the same thing, only different. That's a famous line Blake Snyder says throughout his entire book. It's a famous line that he's known for. Give me the same thing, only different. And that's what a lot of writers ought to be striving to do. Write a story that is familiar in the sense that we know story types like this, tropes, but it is not identical to all the stories we've already ever heard, cliches. There are 10 genres or story types that basically cover every story ever made. It's important to fit your story into one of these. So what we're about to go over is Blake Snyder's 10 story types. And I don't want to say that they're not good. They are good, but I don't want you to think that you have to fit your story into one of these 10, because that's how I thought of it at first, but a lot of these can overlap. A lot of these can be interwoven together. They are beneficial, though, to understand how a story works. So you could see on the screen here are the 10. I'm going to skip this because we're going to read them anyway. There's 10 different genres here and some movie examples on the screen for you to see. So these are the genres explained. Number 1, monster in the house. These stories have two main things, a monster and a house. Put people in the house with the monster, and the story is all about don't be eaten. Basically, every man versus nature horror story falls into this category, specifically a creature in nature. The house must be a definite location, a beach house, a small town, haunted mansion, boat at sea, etc. A sin is usually committed, creation of the monster or disturbing the monster. I think of the movie, what's it called? I think it might just be called Monster House, maybe. It's some old movie I watched when I was a kid, and this house would come alive and chase the kids, and there's this really obvious scene where the sin is committed in the beginning, where the kids disturb the house. This kid is like saying, this house isn't alive, and he's like running up to it, throwing stuff at it, and then it like chases him away. And then you find out what the original sin was that created this house. I think the man like buried his wife there or something. I don't know, something creepy. That's a great example of this movie genre, monster in the house. The rest of the story is run and hide. The whole movie, in that sense, is about survival. Number 2, Golden Fleece. A hero goes on the road in search of one thing and winds up discovering something else, himself. I feel like a lot of movies fall under this concept. Like even movies that don't fall into this specific genre, they always have that takeaway moment in the end. Like, what is the moral to the story? You see the main character take something with them at the end. I think a lot of my stories have that as well. The milestone of this story genre are the people and incidents they encounter along the way. The theme of these stories is internal growth. It's not necessarily the progress that makes up the plot of these stories, but it's the effect of obstacles and how the hero changes. And there is a great movie example. I can't think of the name of it. I'll throw it on screen, but there's this great movie I watched where this kid's a writer, and by the end of the story, I think he goes away to college, but like the plot of the story is him trying to make his way in life. And so like it's kind of like a vague plot, and all the obstacles are just like these meaningful points about him growing in life and his growth that gets him to the end point of being a writer and going to college. And it's really interesting because it's a slow burn style movie, but it works really well. Like, even though there's not one focal point, like I have to get this thing that he's just striving for, and all these obstacles may seem a little random, they're all meaningful to him.
A lot of guys that think they're writers, and you'll find in life that most of them are not. Here's the thing. You gotta have it. But if you don't have it immediately, you never get it. I say you got it.
Oh, I knew it. Oh, I knew it. I knew it. There's something.
Calm down. I didn't say you were good. I said you could be.
So it still has a central meaning to it that makes the story work, and it's really, really good. The writer's job is to make each incident and person the hero encounters meaningful. Heist movies like Ocean's 11, The Dirty Dozen, and The Magnificent Seven all fall under the Golden Fleece genre because, like most heist movies, the mission becomes secondary to more personal discoveries along the road. Out of the bottle. This is number 3. The name comes from the idea of summoning a genie from a bottle or lamp to grant a wish. We all think of Aladdin. These stories take the I wish I had a prayers and answers them by saying, what if it actually happened? These stories are successful due to being so relatable. Whether it be divine intervention, magic, luck, or sheer coincidence, the audience watches as a character's wish is granted and their life begins to change. Sometimes the wish backfires and the character discovers something they actually need, or an underlying wish, like Liar Liar and Freaky Friday. Those movies are great examples here of like the wish is not necessarily something they wished, but it happens anyway. I think of like Home Alone, where there's a scene where Kevin is going up the stairs and his mom's yelling at him. And I think he says, I wish I never had a family.
I hope I never see any of you jerks again.
And then the wish comes true, but he doesn't realize that's not what he actually wanted. And by the end of the story, he's actually like, I wish I had my family back.
Instead of presents this year, I just want my family back.
But Freaky Friday and Liar Liar are great examples because those movies are where a wish backfires, in the sense that in Freaky Friday, it's like, I would have never wished to be in my mom's shoes, but they do say, you don't know how hard it is to live the teenage life or live my life or how much stress I'm under. And that's what causes them to swap places at the Chinese restaurant or whatever. So 2 options. An underdog hero that the audience feels is deserving of good favor is granted a wish to help them reach their happiness. And by the end, they often discover they don't truly need the wish, and there is a moral to the story. Or a wish acts more like a curse to help teach a character with some redeemable quality a lesson. Number 4, dude with a problem. An ordinary guy finds himself in extraordinary circumstances. I love stories like this where I'm not a huge fan of movies where it's like you're in the professional detective shoes or you're in the cop's shoes or the superhero shoes. Like, I don't know, I just can't relate personally. I like stories where it's just like an ordinary person living life just like me, and they're thrown into a crazy situation. That's what I personally like. These stories draw readers and viewers in with sympathy, since we all see ourselves as ordinary. 2 parts: your average Joe, ordinary dude, and a problem. The agenda must be a big enough deal to force the dude into action, like in Die Hard, save the wife that he loves. Always make the bad guy big. Bigger problems make greater heroes. They don't need superpowers, they just need to use their strengths to outwit the bad guy in the end. And I really like this because I can't think of any at the top of my head, but I've seen multiple movies myself where they basically make the bad guy seem dumb or like obviously he's going to lose in the end kind of thing, which I hate. Like, the bad guy should seem undefeatable so that we are left with the intrigue of seeing how the main character is going to overcome this problem and defeat him in the end, right? Like, why would you make him just seem stupid and it's like, oh, this guy's going to fail in the end to something that is coincidental, like he deserves it because he's so dumb. Like, I hate movies like that. They always do that, especially in, I feel like a lot of recent Disney movies, they've been dumbing down the bad guys and making it seem almost softer, I guess you could say, and I hate that. Like, it's so dumb. 5. Rites of passage. These are growing pain stories, full of torment, sadness, usually emotional pain, from something happening in life. It's about a monster attacking from within. The solution to the problem is always found through experience, moving forward and learning to accept that's life. In these movies, characters struggle with grief from things like addiction, breakups, death, and other heavy losses. I just rewatched the movie, I think it's called Gridiron, the football movie with The Rock. I feel like that movie has a lot of concepts from this genre in it, where there is a lot of emotional struggles going on with a lot of the main characters, learning about overcoming some of their personal struggles that they're having.
You're not the loser you were when you first got here, Willie. You're just not used to being a winner.
My father said I was a waste of his time.
Your father was a loser, Willie.
And there's all these different characters that have all this different grief, and they deal with it out on the football field. Number 6, buddy love. These movies show 2 friends on an adventure while talking about things that help them discover truths about themselves and life. Great example of this is Finding Nemo. These movies are relatable from the conversations had between me and my best friend. Buddy love movies are love stories in disguise. Vice versa, all love stories fall into the buddy love category, with the only difference being the potential for more intimacy. I just watched the movie, I think it was called Puppy Love. It had the actor from The Flash in it.
You're the 2 morons who got the pregnancy test for your dog? Yeah, they've been laughing at you in the back for the last 10 minutes.
He's in it, and I was like, oh, I used to watch The Flash, I'll watch this. And it was actually pretty good, but it falls into this genre easily. These movies often start with the buddies hating each other, but on their journey, they realize their need for one another. This often leads to more conflict before a resolution. So basically any chick flick you ever seen, they fall into this. Or any rom-coms, they fall into this. The solution to the story is for the buddies to surrender their egos and admit their need for one another. Oftentimes, one of the buddies does all the changing while the other acts as a catalyst and only has slight change or no change at all. A catalyst is what causes reaction without going under permanent change itself. Sometimes a buddy will come into someone's life, cause change, and then leave. An example of this would be E.T. Number 7, why done it? The who is never as interesting as the why, which I find that to be a really interesting quote in and of itself. Like, because you think the who is what's interesting. Like, as a writer, you think that's the interesting part. But then it's the why that really pulls everything together. It like ties all the loose ends together, and you're like, oh, like you have that epiphany moment. These stories aren't necessarily about the hero changing. It's about discovering something about the human heart that's unexpected, often disturbing and dark, which causes an audience to ask the question, why? The audience becomes a detective, sifting through information as the story unfolds. It is the writer's job to shock them with what they find. And man, this is so important that there is a shock reveal to why something is happening. This goes back to my point of like, I feel like a lot of villains have been dumbed down recently, but if you find the why behind why a villain is doing what they're doing, and they believe that what they're doing is right and good, and it's based on a why, it can almost make us think like, am I that corrupt? Am I thinking that way? Am I that selfish that I'm going to turn to such a corrupt way? If you think of like, I don't know, Anakin Skywalker becoming Darth Vader, like in the beginning, it was all about saving his wife, and like he needs to become strong enough so that he could protect his own.
He could even keep the ones he cared about from dying.
But really, he was deceived.
Love won't save you, Padme. Only my new powers can do that.
And then it was because his wife died that his anger corrupted him even more.
Where is Padme? Is she safe?
It seems in your anger, you killed her.
Making him the bad guy he became. These investigations into the dark side of humanity should cause the audience to wonder to themselves, are we this evil? The view of humanity and its possibilities of dark intentions causes an audience to ponder their own capabilities. Number 8, the fool triumphant. Characters viewed as fools in stories often have an underdog advantage of anonymity and the ultimate chance to prove everyone wrong with his abilities. Great example is Ace Ventura.
Do not go in there.
Or Dumb and Dumber, or any of the detective stories where the main characters just seems like a fool. The principle of the movies is to set the fool up against a bigger, powerful bad guy, often established in society. This also may be an establishment in and of itself, where the man pokes fun at misconceptions that are taken far too seriously, like who can get success in the business world, or what is worthy of reverence culturally. A great example of this is Mr. Robot, where the whole concept is the main character is like, I'm just a
Elliot, just attack.
But he's trying to hack the conglomerate corporation and destroy them. It's a very similar concept to a fool up against the big bad wolf kind of thing. The rules for this genre are that there must be a fool, and few, if any at all, believe in his success. The fool often somehow scrapes by when no one thinks he should, setting up for the enemy to want to attack more and more. Fools often have an accomplice, an insider, someone who tries to interfere only to end up looking like a fool themselves. Number 9, institutionalized. Stories about groups, institutions, and families honors the institution while exposing the problem of losing one's identity to the institution. I feel like Get Out is very much like this, where like you have a main character come in with someone else and he's an outsider and he tries to go against the rules.
Yeah, I told you not to go in that house.
I think that's the concept of that movie, but I may be wrong. These stories usually have a breakout character whose goal is to point out the flaw in the group's movement or goal. This is a very caveman-esque story or primal. Usually the group looks to loyalty over common sense. You're with us or against us. These stories are often told from a newcomer's perspective. It all boils down to the question, who's crazier, me or them? These movies usually push characters to the limit. How far will you go for the family tradition? And then the last genre is number 10, superhero. The exact opposite of number 4, dude with a problem. An extraordinary person finds himself in an ordinary world. Superhero movies identify well with people who feel misunderstood. No wonder so many brainy geeks and teens read comic books. That is so interesting. I never knew that. Like, yeah, wow. This movie genre is also seen in movies where someone is considered special, like a genius or expert surrounded by the simple-minded. Many movies are identical to one another if comparing the beats. For example, Point Break and Fast and Furious, Blank Check and Home Alone, The Matrix and Monsters, Inc. Why does it seem movies copy one another? Because the laws of physics that govern storytelling work every time in every situation. I love that, because there are so many people out there, and you might be one of them. And if you are, let me just tell you, you're wrong. But no, there are so many people out there that believe that story structure is holding them back. It's constraining. They shouldn't be using it, and they need to just freely write from their heart and write their story. And it's just such a misunderstanding of the use of story structure. Story structure is formulaic for a reason, and it's because all stories are interwoven into the understanding of human nature and morality and our DNA. Like, literally, the way we tell stories is because we are all humans. We tell stories the same exact way. That's why, if you ever listen to Joseph Campbell's story, he traveled the world studying storytelling in all these different cultures, some cultures that have never met each other, and they all told similar, if not the same, identical stories. Isn't that weird? That they were able to tell the same stories, but they never met each other. And it's because they're humans. It's because the stories come from the same mouths and the same creators of the stories. We all think of storytelling the same way. And that's why storytelling and story structure can work with literally any story. If you understand how a story works in the background, the foundation, the skeleton of a story, if you understand that, then you can literally take any idea you have and plug it in and make it work, and just elevate it that much more. And obviously there's some people that don't use story structure when they write stories, and they could still write something great, but I would argue that's because their subconscious of understanding story is at work, and they don't realize it. The job of the writer is to understand how and why these beats work. One must take the formula to produce something similar but not familiar. If it's cliche, give it a twist, spice it up, make it fresh. The rules aren't constraining, they are freeing. True originality can't begin until you know what you're breaking away from. I had a mentor that told me basically the same exact thing, that you cannot be a good writer unless you learn how the best writers write. Like, he told me, start reading tons of old classic books and books on writing, because if you can understand the concepts of writing and see the art of writing in these incredible, masterful storytellers, then you'll be able to maybe glean even a nugget of gold, even just a littlest bit from them, that you can be a better writer yourself. Another example I want to quickly give is that if you think of story structure, think of it this way. It's like a roadmap from point A to point B. Let's say we're going from Los Angeles to New York City, right? California to New York. Your story structure will give you the fastest, most efficient line that you can follow to get there. You will see, here's point A, here's point B. That's how you get there in the most efficient way possible. Now, even though you have the most efficient way possible, that doesn't mean you can't take detours. That doesn't mean you can't make a few pit stops. You might stop for gas at this place. The car might break down at this place. You might want to take the scenic route and travel all around the country. You might want to hit every state on the way. There are so many ways you can get from point A to point B, but the structure still stands in between all of the detours you take, so that you have a specific structure you can follow and glean from, but you don't have to follow it perfectly. You don't have to follow that exact road. You can take different roads. Just make sure that you bring it all back to the same end goal, the same end point, and make sure that you still follow things that you learn from the main drag that you could take, but you take those points and you apply them to whatever detours you want to take. That's how I look at story structure. It's like, it's not something you have to follow to a T. You don't have to take that exact road. There are so many other roads you could take, hundreds and thousands of ways you can go about telling the same exact story, getting to the same destination. But knowing the most efficient way, knowing the straight line that will get you there is really beneficial before taking other routes, because then you know different stops that you ought to make and different points that you ought to make throughout. Hopefully that makes sense. These 10 genre types are not meant to categorize every movie. Don't look for exceptions. Instead, use these templates as guides to understand movies. Find the genre that fits your story and learn its rules. Remember, give me the same thing, only different. The job of the storyteller is to take familiar tales of old and update them with a twist our contemporaries can appreciate. And we are going to stop right there. I think that's a really fitting place to stop. We've gone over the 10 genre types of Blake Snyder, and now we're going to get into how that helps us answer different questions about our story. So hopefully you enjoyed this little read through my notes and talking about the different things that Blake Snyder can teach us. And hopefully you learned something, So I hope you were able to take a few things away and take things home with you. So thank you so much for watching. I won't keep you any longer. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. And yeah, leave a like if you like this kind of content. Comment below if you have other books that you would recommend that I should read that you want me to go over. Or just let me know if you're looking forward to the next episode in this series, because hearing feedback from you guys is really helpful. So yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for sticking around this long. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.